Radiating from the heart of America and stretching from coast to coast and border to border, welcome to On Radio, the wireless industry's weekly download coming straight from the builders and newsmakers of everything wireless. Your host is Jim Tracy, and this is On Radio.
Well, wireless friends, welcome back again to On Radio. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome a super guest today, Duane MacEntee. You know, one of the things that comes into play is that when you look, and again, I always go back to the mission statement, because the mission statement defines not only who you are, but really a lot about how you're going to get there, but more importantly, what's important to you. So enhanced safety, we talked about that. We're going to do that, but also, when we first sat down with Marty Travers, guys, just so everybody knows, he is really the genesis of the NWSA, and anybody who got pulled in was pulled in because of his original phone call. So thanks, Marty, you get a salute. But his point was we need to reduce workplace risk. He was saying, hey, it's not even about that. We need to limit the injuries we have from utility knives. We need to stop having exothermic weld explosions that are not warranted. We need to make sure people have PPE on their eyes. And he was just so emphatic about making sure that, I mean, he takes it personal when somebody injures an eye, and it's really important. So he wanted to reduce the workplace risk. And what we do is we say, hey, you have to land here. But in order to land here, if you don't get trained appropriately to pass this rigorous examination, what happens?
So, yeah, the workplace risk component is, as you mentioned, was one of Marty's things. And because a lot of people don't think about it this way, it's all the little stuff that adds up to that bad day.
Yeah,
it's the
exactly.
It's paying attention to the little things and being disciplined around making sure that you're buttoned down and tight as a crew.
Yeah.
And those little infractions, those little things that, oh, I got cut, but I didn't tell anybody, it's first aid only, whatever. Yeah, it goes under the radar. But once you get enough of those, all of a sudden it punches through the surface and you've got that bad day. And that happens a lot. That happens a lot, way too often.
Yeah, once is too often.
Once is too often. And if we don't, here's my personal thought on it. If we don't try to learn from every single thing that happens in the field, whether it's a safety related issue or whatever, something goes wrong, no matter how big or small, we've done a disservice to the workers, frankly.
Exactly.
So yeah, to reduce workplace risk, we embed in our exams a lot of experiential types of questions, and even the practical exam, has, and it's being revised right now. We're rolling out a new exam this year, which has been updated based upon, we have to go back to the industry and do a survey and make sure that we're staying fresh and current with our examinations. So we've revised and are implementing a new practical exam as well, which is just a variant of what was there before, and it touches on those things. You have to have enough of that baked in, because at the end of the day, and this is the truth too, you can train, somebody can be trained, but do they get it? Do they actually implement that training? You have to implement use your knowledge, use your skill. A good job is you do the work per the scope, hopefully within budget and on time, but you also come home at night without injury. That's a good job.
Well, in terms of training, there's an old saying in sports that practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. And if you practice something the wrong way continually and for a long time, which that really defines the early years of wireless, and that really defines the onset of the cellular boom, is that we were practicing, and guilty as charged, we were practicing everything the wrong way, but we were getting or wanting to get progressively better. And so but perfect practice, however, does make perfect. And so if you have perfect practice, making it perfect and permanent, now we have a solution. And when you talk about the practical skills examination, you're talking about something that's getting progressively better. And so I would like, you hear that it's new and people are going to go, oh, they're going to change it. I'm going to freak out. Don't freak out. It's just better. This is the next stage of getting to a place where you're more safe because we're doing stuff right. And then we're checking that you're doing stuff right. Isn't that accurate?
That's more than accurate. I mean, that's absolutely accurate. So one of the things, when we say we're revising something, that's a process that doesn't happen overnight. It's not a blink of the eye. Duane had an idea, something needed to change. It's not that way at all. There's a standard that you're aware of. It's the International Standards Organization, ISO 17024. I know it's getting real technical and in the weeds. We don't need it. But there's a governing standard that's international in nature on how a certification body develops itself and its tests and governs itself accordingly. Mm-hmm. So when a change is required, we have an obligation, and we do this through what's called a job task analysis. We go back to the industry and we have to do this every 3 or 4 years to go back and say, hey, are we doing it? Is our ladder on the right building first? And then are the rungs spaced properly? So we do that, and we just went through that process. I would call it more tweaking than complete revamp. The skills,
here's the rules for getting better. ISO says, here's the rules for getting better. Obey the rules and get better. And now you got a group of industry-wide subject matter experts. And I don't say that lightly, because very few people are really subject matter experts, but the folks you gather in a room, I mean, they are the bomb. And they take all that practical field experience and they lay it down and say, let's choose the best and then see if everybody can agree on it. Well, that's right. A wrestling match in a tiger tank, man.
It really is. And I will tell you, Jim, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm certainly not aware. If something existed, I'm not aware of it. But this is the first time that an organization has collectively pulled together all stakeholders of this industry. Starting in 2013 with Marty's call to action, you had carriers, tower owners, contractors of all different sizes, climbers. Everybody packed that room. Guess what?
Insurance company, educators. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And so
it does.
You really do. And one would think, hey, we're going to get an average decision. You get a group of people together, you're just going to get a mediocre decision. No, we didn't. We got people who were challenging one another from the get-go. So from the very start, they were like, no, don't pull that wool on a contractor. We don't actually do it that way. And then somebody saying, well, you're supposed to do it that way, but that's not, and so that give and take, sometimes it was uncomfortable, we'll say.
Initially, absolutely.
I think that the outcome for the climber is magnificent, because you don't say it the same way in Georgia as you might say it in California. But you do. Right. You are required to do it the same way. And then we're standardizing nomenclature to make sure that everybody understands. Here's the task at hand. So I'm super psyched about that. So we gotta stay on track here. So it's the mission of the National Wildlife Safety Alliance to provide thorough, independent assessments of knowledge and skills, provide verifiable worker certification in order to enhance safety, reduce workplace risk, improve quality. Now wait a minute. How can you have safety and quality go hand in hand?
How can you not? but yeah, that was rhetorical. In all seriousness, so the quality aspect of it, all you have to do is look at, and unfortunately, I've looked at a lot of incident review after the fact. The sad days, right, following an accident or something where there's been a lot of property damage, or it doesn't really matter. Something's gone wrong, seriously wrong. And when you look at it, a bad day. But when you start looking at it, those people that are out there in the field who are operating, as you said, they practice it routinely, safely, all the time. They're also typically paying attention to the details on the quality side. They're not having to do a lot of rework. There's not a lot of go backs, be backs, extra truck rolls, because they're doing it the right way the first time. And believe it or not, there's a perfect positive kind of correlation between the safety and the quality aspect of the job. It's not in addition to, it's all part of the same thing.
For
And
sure.
if you think about it, that's kind of cool. You don't really have to have a separate focus or emphasis on one or the other. Safety is the first of first priorities among equal priorities,
Hmm.
and that's it's really true.
So what I'm
Quality.
hearing is that if you do the small things well, then you're more likely to do the medium things well, and you're
Mhm,
more likely to do the big things well. So do the small things well, do all things well.
mhm.
And there's a natural progression there. And, Scott Kisting is a mutual friend of ours, and he is just famous and infamous for saying that safety and quality do go hand in hand. They cannot not go hand in hand. And you get one, you get the other. So I'm proud that the National Wireless Safety Alliance has acknowledged that if you come in and you do this safety well, your sites are going to be better. And so we're grateful for that. Now, it also says now the NWSA does not do training, but it says we encourage training. How is it possible that you don't do training but you encourage it?
You missed proper training. We encourage
Oh,
proper training.
okay.
Proper training. Yeah. And it's no secret. Listen, we're having a good conversation here, but it's no secret. There have been bogus training initiatives that have existed in this
Really?
industry since I absolutely, and you know that as well as any, and we're kind of calling it right here, putting it on the
Yeah,
table. And
sure.
it's not that we do training, but again, if you validate and verify the skills of someone who has quote unquote been trained, you know real quickly whether they've been trained properly or not. It's
Yeah.
pretty evident, and it's our job to make the testing not an easy test, but the process of testing needs to be such that it's not the test itself that influences the outcome of the exam score, right? It needs to be strictly based on the knowledge and skills that are being examined or assessed. And so we work very hard to make sure our tests themselves are designed so that it's not difficult to do the test. It's difficult to show it. The difficulty should become, can you answer the question? Can you perform the skill? And if you're trained well, properly, you can do that. We do work very closely with our training community in our industry to understand, what feedback they're getting. We listen. We have to. And there are a number of training entities that have stepped up to the plate for the right reasons because they believe in standardization of what we're trying to achieve here. You're still going to, climbing certs, training to rescue is very important. We don't do that. We don't train to that. However, if the industry tells us we need to validate that, we can certainly design a test to do so, right? And we have. So the triple T1, for example, is very, very weighted. It's about 30% or so of that exam is based upon climbing safety, about 30%, not 100%, but about 30%. And then as you move, then we get to triple T2, you've already proven that you know that piece. So we move on to more detailed skills that we assess for.
So, so one of the things that people may not understand, Duane, is that your background includes an engineering background, which is kind of important if you want the towers to stand up, and a legal background, and that because of the ownership side, that's really important, but also the safety side. You've been on the hey, I want you to do things right enforcement side, and you've also been on the ops side, like I want you to do it safe, but you also still got to get it done. And you've been up a tower in Wisconsin, so you know what it's like when you're so cold that nothing else really matters.
And
um,
and I'll tell you what, that's true. In my case,
yeah,
I was so focused on how cold I was having a hard time focusing on what I should have been.
yeah. Well, and so when you stroll into that group of people, I just want people to understand that we didn't just say, "Hey, we found this guy who is like going to head up the NWSA." We found the guy who is qualified uniquely in many many ways to actually understand what our folks go through and how this credential will benefit them, because we still have to get to that last point of recognizing the skilled professionals on towers and other non-standard structures. So when we first did this, one of the biggest things that we thought is that electricians get a card, even the plumbers might get a card, but our folks do stuff that's way more complex, way tougher, way more hazardous in some respects, because gravity never stops working. And an RF that's pumping, you better understand, even though you can't see it, touch it, taste it, feel it, whatever. You have to know what's going on around you and be situationally aware. And we have to do it with a laptop or a piece of sweep gear or loads and shorts and all this stuff. And we have to splice fiber and all these. And it's getting really complex now. So why don't we recognize the dignity of these folks as the trade craft that they truly are? It's tougher, it's more complex, it's more hazardous. So let's recognize that as the trade craft that it is. That was part of this, wasn't it?
Absolutely. As I mentioned before, the professionalism, the word professional, from the very earliest days of the discussions around before NWSA even existed, that was always on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
It was always there. And I will say, one of the things that was identified early on was that, it's an evolution. The industry has gone through a lot. Back in the 90s, before, it was really very heavily construction, just construction, kind of, let's get the steel in the air. And that's still a big part of it. Erecting towers, modifications to towers, still a huge part of it. And it's a different skill set that does that versus one that does, sweep testing, that it's just but that being said, there's a lot of similarity between the craft as well. So professionalism, in the sense of, we've evolved as an industry to not just be the strict blue collar construction worker, go out there and just, boots, concrete and steel kind of work. There's a lot of technology that goes into what a technician, and we chose the word technician, that's in there. And that's aligned very closely with what the industry has said through the Department of Labor definitions of occupations is what's necessary. So we work very closely with an organization called TIRAP, Telecommunications Industry Registered Apprenticeship Program, through that's administered through the WIA. And we align ourselves with those types of initiatives to make sure we're like the capstone, if you will, to become more of a powder blue collar. It's not strict blue collar. It's certainly not white collar, but it's more this powder blue, because it's more than just understanding construction. You also have to understand the technology and put those two together.
To that point, I think it's really important that the folks who are listening to our podcast understand this was not even so much about the way that you look at yourselves. This is about the way that the industry looks at you. And we want you to carry yourself with the dignity that is warranted the American worker, because the jobs that you have to do happen in places that they're jobs that others can't do or won't do, in places that they can or won't go, and in tasks that they can't do. So we salute you, and we just celebrate your accomplishments, and hopefully this kind of worker certification affords you the dignity that you have earned. Isn't that accurate?
Couldn't have said it better, Jim. I mean, that's really on point.
Yeah, and we actually love the American tower worker without reservation or hesitation, because 80% of all calls happen on 911 from a mobile device. And so even 911 is counting on you folks. And we appreciate you and salute you. And the NWSA and Duane, thank you for joining us today. The NWSA is here to serve and recognize the skilled American tradesman who actually happens to be a tower technician. So with that, thank you again for stopping by on radio. We are so thrilled you did. And also, folks, let's choose safety today. This is Jim. All right?
Thanks for tuning in today, and join us every week. Tell your people to listen in and subscribe to On Radio, the voice of everything wireless.